welcome to Retech, and today we're going to talk about the Mattel Aquarius. The Mattel Aquarius is a machine I've had for quite some time now. I believe I've only taken it out of the box once, maybe twice. And there's a good reason for that. It was because they weren't produced for that long. They were literally on the market for about 3 months. That is it. That is the entire lifespan of this machine. And they were then kind of sold on without the Mattel badging on them. But yeah, the machine itself wasn't that bad. I mean, it was obviously not correct for the time, but the machine really had some good things going about it, which we'll cover shortly. And we're also going to cover something that's kind of emerged for this machine, and it's from one of my kind of site supporters. He's been kind of sending me stuff since the early days of this channel, and he's been a really good proponent of what I do. So I'm going to cover something new for this machine, but we're also going to cover a little bit about this machine as well and what makes it so individual. So let's have a quick look. So why did Mattel, a massive corporation who was well known for games, get it so wrong? Well, the upshot of it is it was too late. There was nothing intrinsically wrong with this machine. There's nothing intrinsically wrong even with their chiclet style keyboard, because a lot of machines had various weird keyboards, and it really wasn't a big deal breaker back in the early 1980s. And this keyboard is arguably better than the ZX Spectrum one. It does have a few shortcomings, as in it doesn't have an auto repeat function when you hold the key down, and that goes for the same for delete. You have to keep pressing the keys individually. But you know, every machine at the time had their own failings. This one was very well put together. It's a nice compact unit. The keyboard is a little on the small side, but it does have a cartridge port under this black cover here, and it's a much heavier unit than the ZX Spectrum as well, and it has a bit more of a quality feel about the machine as well. Now, if we take a look around the machine, there's not really a lot to offer from the back of the machine. You have a very weird jack in comparison to even the machines at the time for a printer, a cassette interface, RF, and a molded in power cable. And that's really about it. Apart from removing the top here, you've got a cartridge port. It wasn't massively spec'd, but it wasn't under spec, because if you remember, likes of the ZX81, you basically got an edge connector and an RF and a cassette era mic jack on it, and that was it. So again, in comparison to its contemporaries, it wasn't that far away. So after having a quick look at the Aquarius, you see that it wasn't all bad. It was a nicely built machine, and I like it. I like the way it looks. I've kind of been a fan of the way it looked from almost day one, when I used to compare it to the likes of the ZX81 and even the kind of the emerging ZX Spectrum. I always liked the look of this, and it looked a very well built machine, and it looked very professional. But in the flesh, it's kind of larger than the Spectrum, but not as deep. It's got an arguably probably a better keyboard than the Spectrum, but it still has its quirks with the space bar and the return being in odd positions. It doesn't have an auto repeat on it, which I did mention, but also it kind of felt a little bit of an earlier age machine once I started to play with it. But you know, it didn't detract from the fact that I like the look of this thing. But at the end of the day, it was a market failure. It didn't do well. Okay, so before we do any of that, we're going to set the Wayback Machine to 1983, and you can see a copy of this popular computing weekly. and this was 11th to the 17th of August, and it basically has a few articles that I actually remember from the time, and one of them was about the Mattel Aquarius, and this was basically around the time of its launch. So the Mattel Aquarius was reviewed by Jeff Naylor from the Popular Computing magazine, and he kind of came to a very similar conclusion than I did. He says that the machine's very well built, it's very heavy, it's got quite a nice feel to the keyboard in comparison to maybe the ZX Spectrum, because the rubber is much harder. It's not as soft and squishy as the ZX Spectrum item was. But you know, you do need things like this mini expander on the bottom here to actually make this system work, because it comes with 2 paddles and also a cartridge expander, so you can put your extra memory and your cartridges in at the same time. Without this mini expander here, you're kind of limited to cartridge games or extra memory. You can't run both. And he kind of covers the machine quite well, because you know, he does open it up, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of components in. I think a lot of them were off-the-shelf components anyway, which made it quite a big board in comparison to the Spectrum, and a very well populated board. But again, he hits on a 72 character limit on entering code in there, or basic at the time. So again, it did have its limitations. And as you work through, you can kind of see the mini expander connected to it. He comes to the conclusion of where basically he's wondering where this machine's exactly aimed at, because the graphics capabilities are slightly subpar, the memory subpar, the keyboards, well, it's not really subpar for the time, but it was soon to be seen that way, because that's how the ZX Spectrum keyboard was being seen. And basically he was kind of a bit of a loss of where to place this machine, which I completely agree with him, because at the time I liked the machine, but I was also at a loss of where you would place this machine, as this article from the era kind of covers and says. And I think that was the opinion of most people for the Mattel Aquarius. It was a well built, pretty much well designed and fairly robust machine, with kind of a lot of shortcomings for the time, because it was a step above the ZX81, but it was a step below the ZX Spectrum in terms of outright capabilities. The resolution was a step down to the Intellivision. The sound chip on it, well, you basically had to buy an AY sound chip, which was through the mini expander to get any sort of decent kind of noise out of it. And again, that was a very expensive add-on. The mini expander virtually cost almost what the actual machine cost as well. The memory was expensive, and I'm guessing Mattel thought we'll bring the machine out at £79, which is what they were shipping it out when it first launched, and then we'll try and get some money back on the peripherals that we sell. And it's not really a great strategy, because it doesn't always work, because Atari tried that with proprietary cartridges, but it kind of started slipping in the sales, because once you had micros out there, and once you had other machines where the manufacturers left it as an open platform with no licensing for software, etc., it kind of got rid of the licensing cartridge only kind of model that Atari and I think Aquarius were actually going down that route. Texas Instruments did the same with its route, and it didn't work. So yeah, I agree with this review at the time, and I believe that it was just too late. It really didn't have a place, and it would have had a place if it was released a year earlier, and it would have had a place if they produced a lot of software for it at the time of launch, but they didn't. So it's a shame, because it could have been quite a decent machine, especially a decent starter machine, and it would have probably lasted a lot longer and taken a lot more battering than your ZX Spectrum would have, because the build quality was infinitely better. I mean, if we look through contemporary articles at the time, or advertising at the time, remember this was at the time, okay? We have a Mattel Aquarius with a 20k add-on selling for £100, £99. We have the Atari 400 selling at £129, which was arguably a much more powerful machine, better sound, better graphics, arguably a worse keyboard, but overall it was a much nicer machine. You had the ColecoVision, which again was a step up in graphics when you compare it to the Aquarius, and you know, it kind of had a hard time fitting in. I mean, if you wanted out and out games at the time, you could get an Atari console from used one from 39, and obviously you could even buy a new one from about 69. The Intellivision, Mattel's own Intellivision, which is what the kind of the Aquarius was really up against. If you wanted something to play games and to run BASIC, then the Aquarius was probably a good bet, but the Intellivision had better graphics at the time, so anything that would appear on the Aquarius would be slightly downgraded from your Intellivision. So really, even on this page of 2 pages of adverts, the Aquarius struggles to find a market and struggles to fit, which is a shame, because I kind of like that in the same way as I like the original Auric 1, mainly because of its design and its colours and the way it looks and, you know, the way it feels. But again, that really doesn't make a machine, which is why the BBC Micro, with its kind of more robust, more kind of mechanical keyboard on it and its more utilitarian kind of feel to it, was a better machine. It didn't go down the route of kind of style over function, it was more function over form. So essentially what you see here was in a nutshell, the Mattel Aquarius. Not a terrible machine, but if it was being marked at school, it would probably have a footer on your report saying could have done better. Now, what surprises me is that there are a few people producing add-ons for these, add-ons for a machine that was only sold for about 3 months. And I'm going to cover them all, but at the moment I'm just going to cover one, and that's from You Make Robots. And they have been very good in the past. They've managed to produce items that go very, very well with other machines. And they produce cassette alternatives. The one I actually ordered from him, because you know it's nice to order them instead of being given them now and again, was a unit which kind of grabbed my attention. It was for the Mattel Aquarius, and what makes this very different is the fact that, you know, the person I bought it off, the company You Make Robots, decided to add in a little bit of a treat, and we'll cover that in a moment. And it's this. About it is the kind of styling around the Aquarius. I mean, it has the Aquarius badging on it, it kind of looks the part, and it looks very, very good when sat next to your machine. And it's a better system than tape loading, and all you need to do is drop your files onto an SD card which sits in the front and just connect it by your standard cassette cable, to the machine itself, and it works in a very similar way to all of the others. And as you can see, this is some of the other items that he does, from the MSX to the Acorn Electron to the Ultimate one, which covers most machines. And then of course we have the new Aquarius model, and the nice thing about it is that if you look carefully on the side, you have a nice blue cover to it to try and match the keys with a white casing. And I know that the one below it can do what this can do, and I know there are other alternatives out there, but I also know that there's been quite a lot of effort going into these units, and it's nice to see it being done, and they work in a very similar way to each other. You drop the files on and then you load them onto your Aquarius, and it becomes a lot better than trying to basically mess around with 30-plus-year-old cassette tapes. And it works a treat, and if you have an Aquarius, then I'd kind of recommend getting hold of one, simply because it is convenient. You can put every game and every ROM that was ever produced for the Aquarius on one SD card, and then you're ready to go. And I've been very, very impressed with not just the design of these, but the quality of these, and the fact that somebody's gone to take all the time and the endeavor to produce something for a machine where there are very, very few out there is just amazing, really, because there isn't much incentive for people to do this, because there isn't an awful lot of gain from it monetarily. So this, in my mind, is a brilliant piece of kit from somebody who wants to support the 8-bit community. So this is your Aquarius, and this is the tape adapter, and this is something I believe that if you do have one, as in a Mattel Aquarius, it's something you should buy. But if you've got any other machine, just drop him a line. There's a link below, and I'm sure he'll be able to sort something out for you. Okay, and again, I can't see there being a vast amount of money being made from this. I think it's more for the love of doing it. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we got a little bit of a gift with one of these here, these little cassette drives, or cassette replacement drives, and it was this. And it was quite weird, because I was actually looking for something to replace my old wallet, which I've had for a long time, and it's kind of well past its use by date. But in the box we had this, which was fantastic. It's a nice little kind of retro addition to your card carrying capability, because I don't know how many people actually carry cash anymore, but this is ideal for carrying your cards and your bank details and so on. And it's a really, really nice little gift, and it wasn't expected. As I said, it was a while since I actually received this package, because I was building everything you see kind of around here, and so it was kind of a month or so before I actually got around to opening it. So what do I actually think of the Mattel Aquarius? Well, I'm still two minds as to what I actually originally thought about the machine, and then what I actually originally thought about the machine once I'd had a chance to experience it. The first impressions was nice looking, well built machine. My second impression is it could have been better, and my current impression is I like it as a piece of retro hardware. But being able to do much more with it is kind of debatable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out what we can do with this machine. I'm going to, apart from this really nice device, I'm going to collect all of the other devices that are out there for this machine, and then I'll see what it can do, how useful it is, and maybe it won't spend so long in the box next time. Okay, so Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching my little foray into the Mattel Aquarius again. I'm hoping to do more on this machine, and I'm hoping to be able to do more on this machine. So please watch this space. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.